The final move narcissists use when they can't control you anymore. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Carl Jung's words echo deeply in the hidden corners of human psychology. In today's episode on spiritual wisdom, we'll uncover the final, most insidious move narcissists make when they realize they've lost control over you. This is more than just theory. It's a psychological pattern that can silently sabotage your healing and personal power if you're not aware of it. Understanding this tactic isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about reclaiming your peace, your autonomy, and your soul's growth. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's behavior shifted the instant you stopped needing them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's dive into this powerful truth together. 1. Narcissists fear your strength, not your rejection. Carl Jung revealed a chilling truth that few dare to see clearly. Narcissists do not fear abandonment. They fear your strength. They panic not when you walk away, but when you no longer need their validation. It is your psychological independence, your emotional clarity, your healing that terrifies them. Because the moment you rise from the ashes of their control, they begin to unravel. And as Jung described through his concept of the power inversion crisis, this is the moment when the narcissist, sensing that they are losing grip over your soul, launches their final and most insidious tactic, not to win you back, but to break you down. This tactic is quiet, refined, and deeply manipulative. It is not rage. It is not begging. It is sabotage disguised as concern, distortion masked as love. They begin to project everything they once were. The gaslighting, the lies, the cruelty suddenly becomes your fault. They reverse the narrative and place their darkness on your back, accusing you of being what they always were. This projection isn't random. It's a desperate defense mechanism to preserve their false image. Jung's work on the shadow makes it clear. The narcissist cannot accept their own flaws, so they must see them in you. Your growth, your healing, your refusal to engage in the old dynamic acts like a mirror reflecting their wounded ego. And rather than face the shame buried deep within their psyche, they would rather inject it back into you. But this time, you're no longer the same. Your soul is more conscious now. You can feel the manipulation instead of falling for it. Yet even as you stand in your new power, they'll try one more spiritual ambush. They'll play the victim. They'll spread stories, twist facts, and recruit others to their cause. They will attempt to isolate you, not physically, but emotionally and energetically. They want you to question your reality, to wonder if maybe you were the toxic one all along. They hope to see the light fade from your eyes and the strength in your soul hesitate. But this is where your true test begins. Not in fighting back, but in holding the line. Because this final move is not about reconnection. It's about destruction. They want to leave you with doubt, so that even in your freedom, you remain enslaved by the residue of their manipulation. What Jung understood, what every soul must come to learn, is that real freedom is not just walking away. It's staying away with clarity. It's refusing to let old chains wrap around your newly healed spirit. The narcissist's last move only works when your boundaries are weak and your inner child is still searching for their approval. But when your soul has awakened, when your truth no longer trembles under pressure, the spell breaks. Their final move becomes powerless, not because they stopped trying, but because you stopped needing it. And that, above all, is the moment you finally win. Have you ever stood firm in your truth and watched a narcissist lose control? If so, share your experience in the comments so others can gain strength from your story. If not, comment, "I choose strength," to declare your commitment to healing and spiritual growth. 2. The power inversion crisis. Carl Jung called it the power inversion crisis. That pivotal moment when a narcissist senses they've lost control over you and your energy is no longer theirs to feed on. As you begin to heal, as you set clear boundaries and no longer react to their chaos, something in their psyche snaps. You are no longer their emotional supply. Your silence becomes louder than your words, your peace more unsettling than your anger, and your detachment more powerful than your past dependence. This shift terrifies the narcissist because it forces them to confront a truth they've avoided their whole lives. Without your attention, they are nothing. Jung believed narcissists project their disowned shadow onto others to maintain a sense of superiority. But when you become spiritually grounded and emotionally independent, that mirror shatters. They're left staring at their own emptiness. That's when they make their final move. This isn't about love, it's about power. They'll reappear with tears, apologies, or claims of transformation, but don't be fooled. These are not the cries of a changed soul. They are survival tactics. They will say you've grown cold, that you're abandoning them, that you were the problem all along. But what's really happening is that you've evolved beyond their reach. You no longer react, and that makes you dangerous to their illusion. In today's world, we see this pattern play out in relationships where one partner reclaims their worth and begins thriving. Suddenly, the narcissist, who once ignored or belittled them, returns with false promises, dramatic gestures, or public pity-seeking. They don't want you back. They want the power they lost. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that the journey of the soul is toward wholeness, not validation. Individuation requires breaking free from roles and identities built on pleasing others or fearing their disapproval. Narcissists fear this because your transformation holds up a mirror to their stagnation. Your light forces them to see their shadow. Your boundaries challenge their entitlement, and your growth exposes their spiritual paralysis. They will try to make you doubt your truth. They will paint your strength as selfishness and your independence as betrayal. But none of it is real. What's real is your awakening. What's real is your power. What's real is that your healing has shifted the dynamic forever, and they cannot reverse it. So when they come with one last trick, understand this isn't about you. It's about their fear of losing access to a soul that once filled the void they refused to heal. Stand firm. Stay rooted. Your peace is your protection. Your detachment is your shield. And your awareness is your liberation. The final move is not an ending. It's a spiritual initiation. If you pass the test, you reclaim your sovereignty, not just in the relationship, but in life. Because as Carl Jung taught, the soul's journey is not to remain small enough to be controlled, but powerful enough to walk away unapologetically whole. Do you feel the shift within you the moment you stop feeding the narcissist's power and reclaim your own? If this message resonates with your soul, declare it in the comments. I reclaim my power and protect my peace. 3. Strength shaming. Turning your growth into a weapon against you. When a narcissist can no longer control you through your wounds, they shift their focus and begin attacking your healing. They don't aim for your insecurities anymore. They target your evolution. This is what Carl Jung called strength shaming, a twisted psychological tactic where the narcissist turns your growth into something ugly. Your clarity becomes arrogance. Your boundaries become cruelty. Your independence becomes coldness. And your voice, once silenced, now labeled as too much. They take the very qualities you fought hard to reclaim and try to make you feel guilty for having them. But this isn't about truth. It's about power. It's about making you second-guess the very progress that sets you free. Narcissists can't stand losing control. And when your spirit rises, it confronts the lie they built their identity around. Jung once said, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion. And in this game, the shame isn't yours. It's projected onto you by someone who never intended for you to heal." The deeper truth is this: your strength threatens their illusion. They can no longer dominate a version of you that no longer exists. So they cling to manipulation cloaked as criticism. This isn't random. It's spiritual warfare disguised as emotional guilt tripping. Your growth reflects everything they've refused to face in themselves. It's not that you're too strong. It's that your strength makes them feel small. And instead of doing the inner work, they try to pull you back into their broken reality. But don't fall for it. Don't confuse emotional maturity with arrogance just because someone's uncomfortable with your glow. The moment you began setting boundaries, you disrupted a dynamic they depended on. They're not angry because you've changed. They're panicking because you're not changing back. And in their panic, they'll say anything to shake your confidence. This is why spiritual awareness is your greatest defense. When you know who you are at a soul level, no one can convince you otherwise. You stop justifying your peace. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You realize that their disapproval isn't a signal that you've done something wrong. It's confirmation that you've done something right. The narcissist never wanted growth. They wanted compliance. They didn't want a healed version of you. They wanted a controlled one. And now that you've stepped into your truth, they resort to gaslighting your evolution. But their final move only works if you internalize it. The more they call your boundaries cold, the more you root into your self-respect. The more they accuse your confidence of being ego, the more you trust your spirit. Because they're not describing you, they're revealing themselves. So when they twist your strength into something shameful, see through the mask. Let their projections slide off your energy like water off armor. This isn't the time to explain yourself. It's the time to embody yourself. The real spiritual lesson isn't in fighting back, but in no longer needing to prove your worth to someone who benefits from your doubt. That's when you reclaim your power. Not by shouting, not by pleading, but by standing fully in your light and letting their darkness fail to find a home in you. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Have you ever been shamed for growing stronger? Let's talk about it and keep uncovering the truth, one layer at a time. 4. Nostalgic manipulation, emotional time travel. They don't actually miss you. They miss the version of you that was easy to manipulate, the one who tolerated their chaos in silence, who gave more than you received, who lived to please even when it crushed your spirit. When shame and guilt no longer hold power over you. Narcissists shift tactics. They turn to something far more deceptive: nostalgia. They softly say, "I miss the old you," not because they cherish memories, but because they want to resurrect the version of you that served their ego. It's not affection, it's control, wearing a sentimental mask. Carl Jung warned us that sentimentality is a superstructure covering brutality. And this is exactly what's happening. It's emotional time travel, a deliberate attempt to drag your soul back into an outdated identity where you once abandoned yourself to be accepted. This manipulation thrives on emotional memory. It plays like a lullaby of the past, soothing on the surface, but laced with spiritual poison. They want to trigger a regression, pulling you back into familiar roles that your healed self has outgrown. They don't want to meet the man you are now. They fear him, the one who knows his worth, sets boundaries, and walks in emotional clarity. The one who no longer defines love by sacrifice. So they reconstruct an idealized version of the past, not as it truly was, but as a fantasy where they were adored and you were submissive. And if you're not aware, your soul can begin to confuse comfort with authenticity, mistaking manipulation for connection. Nostalgic manipulation doesn't scream, it whispers. It slides in like a memory wrapped in warmth, but beneath it lies the cold agenda of control. They'll say, "You used to be so patient, so sweet," hoping you'll feel ashamed of your new strength. But you didn't become cold, you became clear. You didn't lose compassion, you gained consciousness. You didn't turn cruel, you stopped shrinking. The spiritual trap here is subtle. If you try to prove you're still the good one, you'll slowly erase the boundaries that protect your soul. You'll start apologizing for your growth, and that's exactly what they want. Because the more you evolve, the less access they have. Your transformation threatens their illusion. When you no longer chase approval or perform for acceptance, you become untouchable to people who thrived on your emotional confusion. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now you see the pattern. You see that some people only loved the unhealed version of you because it made them feel powerful. They called it love, but it was dependent. They called it chemistry, but it was trauma. They called it a connection, but it was control. And now that you've awakened, they want to rewrite the story and cast you as the one who changed, as if growth is betrayal. But you don't owe anyone the older version of yourself just because they were more comfortable with your pain. Your soul didn't come here to remain in cycles that suffocate your light. It came to evolve, to rise, to remember who you are without the mask of pleasing, without the chains of false loyalty. And when a narcissist tries to bait you with the past, that's your signal. Not to go back, but to go deeper into your truth. Comment, "I see it now." If you've ever been pulled back by someone romanticizing the past, or "not me anymore," if you've broken free from that old version of yourself. 5. Manufactured vulnerability, their most dangerous weapon. When guilt, shame, and silence no longer give them power over you, the narcissist plays their last and most insidious card: manufactured vulnerability. They fake or exaggerate personal crises, mysterious illnesses, emotional breakdowns, or chaotic family emergencies that always seem to arise the moment you begin to pull away. But as Carl Jung taught us, This is no accident. It's calculated. It's not vulnerability. It's manipulation wrapped in a mask of suffering. What looks like a cry for help is actually a weapon designed to pierce your empathy and hijack your boundaries. Because they know your soul is soft. They know that your heart opens easily, and they weaponize it not because they want love, but because they want control. Just like a puppeteer pulls strings to animate a lifeless doll, the narcissist tugs on your compassion to keep you in their web. They study you, mirror your values, and exploit your kindness until you question whether helping them means abandoning yourself. Sarah, a strong woman who had finally ended years of psychological warfare, was beginning to breathe again. She was healing. But just as she started to reclaim her identity, the phone rang. Her ex cried, claiming he was seriously ill and had no one else to turn to. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Her heart said to help. Her soul whispered caution. Against her intuition, she returned, and within weeks, found herself trapped again. No diagnosis, no crisis. Just a manufactured illusion to regain access to her energy. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon. He explained that people who cannot face their own shadow will manipulate others into carrying it for them. The narcissist is terrified of losing control because your healing is proof that their power was never real. And so, they manufacture a version of weakness to appear innocent because they know your instinct is to rescue, not retreat. But real empathy is not self-betrayal. True compassion does not require martyrdom. Jung's path of individuation calls you to honor your wholeness, even when others try to guilt you into fragments. The narcissist's crisis always revolves around one goal: to bring you back under their emotional jurisdiction, not because they value you, but because they miss the control. And this is where spiritual clarity becomes your greatest defense. When you realize that not every cry deserves your attention, especially from those who never showed you real care, you begin to reclaim your soul's authority. You stop mistaking manipulation for intimacy. You stop answering the door when chaos knocks in the costume of crisis. Because you finally understand. A person who only becomes fragile when you set boundaries was never truly broken. They were simply entitled to your strength. So the next time someone shows up bleeding only when you walk away, ask yourself who they were when you needed them most. And remember, not every act of care is healing. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is refuse to play the role they wrote for you in a script called control. Your soul is not a lifeline for those who drown by choice. It is a light, and you were never meant to dim it for someone who only sees its glow as leverage. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights on how to recognize emotional manipulation, protect your empathy, and stay rooted in your boundaries even when the crisis feels real. 6. Weaponized empathy and boundary collapse. Narcissists don't always destroy you by shouting or demeaning you. Sometimes, their most dangerous weapon is subtle. They turn your own empathy against you. Carl Jung warned us that those who refuse to confront their own soul will do anything to avoid it, even manipulate others to keep from facing their emptiness. When a narcissist can no longer control you overtly, they shift their strategy. They start to study your guilt, your compassion, and your spiritual values like a map. They don't need to overpower you physically or emotionally. They just need you to betray yourself. Just this once, they say, appealing to the part of you that wants to do the right thing. But it's never just once. Every time you give in out of guilt or misplaced loyalty, you're not being kind. You're handing them the keys back to a house they were evicted from for a reason. Each concession might feel like compassion, but in truth, it's a spiritual reversal. What they seek is not reconciliation. What they crave is proof. Proof that they still matter more than your well-being. Proof that they can still make you bend, even after you've risen. They want confirmation that their shadow still lives in your light. This isn't healing. It's a calculated test. They don't want your forgiveness. They want your surrender. They want you to mistake your soul's growth for selfishness and confuse your boundaries with cruelty. But spiritual maturity means recognizing that real compassion does not ask you to harm yourself for someone else's comfort. It's not your job to carry their emotional baggage while sacrificing your peace. Jung's teachings about the shadow self remind us that people who are unwilling to face their wounds will project them onto others. So when a narcissist resents your progress, your strength, your serenity, it's not because you've done something wrong. It's because you reflect the truth they're desperate to deny. Your presence becomes a mirror, and in it, they see what they don't want to face, their own unhealed soul. Instead of owning that, they'll try to make you feel guilty for being whole, for being free, for being spiritually aligned. That's where the final move begins. They use nostalgia, shared memories, or old emotional debts to lure you back into a space you've outgrown. But don't fall for it. It's not love. It's control, disguised as vulnerability. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you who didn't know your worth. And every time you soften your boundary in the name of compassion, you're inviting that version of yourself to return. But you're not that person anymore. You've done the work. You've faced your pain. You've realigned with your soul. Spiritual integrity means choosing yourself not because you're heartless, but because you're whole. So when the narcissist comes back with teary eyes or passive pleas, remember this: you're not abandoning them. You're honoring the part of you that was abandoned for too long. Your boundaries are not rejection, they are protection. And the highest form of love you can give is the one that doesn't require you to lose yourself in the process. Comment below. My empathy is no longer a weapon against me. If you're ready to protect your boundaries and honor your growth. 7. Differentiated compassion is your shield. Differentiated compassion is the moment your soul remembers its worth without needing permission. It's the art of caring deeply without being devoured, of seeing someone's suffering without stepping into their chaos. Carl Jung's final insight isn't just psychological, it's spiritual armor. When a narcissist can no longer control you, they resort to the last tactic in their arsenal: exploiting your empathy. They weaponize your goodness, banking on the fact that you'll feel guilty enough to re-enter the cage they've crafted from your own compassion. But here's what Jung understood deeply. The need to manipulate you is not a sign of power. It's a sign of their collapse. It proves you've already broken free. The moment you stopped reacting, stopped over-explaining, stopped bending to their emotional theatrics, you disrupted their illusion of control, and in doing so, reclaimed something sacred to your soul. When you practice differentiated compassion, you don't become less kind. You become wise and kind. You begin to understand that rescuing someone who is committed to their dysfunction is not compassion. It's self-abandonment. You no longer confuse love with sacrifice. You stop believing that your purpose is to be the emotional crutch for someone who refuses to stand. And that shift, that internal pivot from codependence to spiritual sovereignty, is the greatest threat to the narcissist's false power. That's why their final move is always emotional theater. They may cry, beg, or suddenly appear transformed. But that performance is not love, it's survival. They are scrambling to find a new script because the old one, where you betray yourself for their comfort, no longer works. You've changed the story. You are no longer the fixer, the pleaser, or the sacrifice. You are now the mirror. And in that mirror, they see their lack of control, their emptiness, their shadow. This is when your boundaries are tested most. But you don't owe your peace to someone who only values you when they're losing you. You owe your soul the dignity of truth. Jung believed that the soul's evolution demands differentiation, not just from others, but from your own unconscious habits of guilt and self-erasure. The deeper you go into your healing, the less available you become for manipulation disguised as love. And when you stand in that grounded space, not cold, not angry, but clear, you become untouchable. Because real compassion isn't loud. It's not reactive. It's rooted. And when rooted, it cannot be moved by temporary storms or teary performances. It simply observes, honors, and holds the line. So when the narcissist's final move unfolds, when they come with softened words, spiritual language, and desperate affection, do not mistake the illusion for transformation. The soul recognizes real change. It doesn't need to be convinced. You'll feel it in your nervous system. And if your soul whispers no, let that be your answer. Because you're not abandoning anyone. You're simply refusing to abandon yourself ever again. If this message awakened something in you, comment below. I can care without losing myself. My soul is free, and I stand in truth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the final move narcissists make when they lose control. An insight rooted in Carl Jung's profound understanding of human psychology. The more we become aware of these hidden dynamics, the more we can protect our peace, reclaim our power, and continue our journey of spiritual growth with clarity and strength. If this video has brought you a new perspective or affirmed something you felt deep within, please like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights into healing, consciousness, and the soul's transformation. Stay wise, stay empowered. Empaths weren't sent to heal, but to expose humanity's deepest wounds. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. But what if that journey requires you to stop trying to fix the world and start revealing what it's been hiding? In today's video, we dive into one of Jung's most powerful yet misunderstood truths. Empaths weren't sent to heal others. They were sent to expose the collective shadow we've all ignored. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by others' pain or misunderstood for your sensitivity, this message is for you. Are you ready to reclaim your power, not as a healer, but as a mirror? Leave a comment below. What do you believe is the role of the empath in today's world? Let's awaken together. 1. The true purpose of the empath. Awakener, not healer. Empaths were never meant to be emotional sponges, endlessly soaking up the wounds of others. Their soul was not designed for rescue. It was born for revelation. Carl Jung warned us that what we fail to make conscious will rule our lives from the shadows. And this is precisely where the empath's role begins. Not in soothing discomfort, but in awakening what's been long denied. Their sensitivity is not a flaw to overcome. It is a sacred tool, an initiation into soul work, a portal into the unseen layers of the human condition. When they walk into a room, they don't just sense emotions, they decode silence. They don't just empathize, they expose. Through their very presence, they pull to the surface the rage we suppress, the shame we inherited, the grief we never voiced, and the pain that has echoed across bloodlines for generations. This ability to feel the collective unconscious is not random, it is archetypal. Empaths mirror humanity's spiritual wounds. They hold up a soul-deep reflection that forces others to confront what they've buried. And this mirror is not always welcome. Society rewards the illusion of strength and punishes emotional honesty. So when an empath stands firm in their truth, they are often misunderstood, rejected, or accused of being too sensitive. But their gift is not emotional instability, it's energetic precision. Their body is wired to register what is unspoken, to translate psychic residue into embodied experience. And this isn't just emotional intelligence, it's spiritual radar. It's how the soul says, pay attention. Something here is unresolved. Empaths were not sent to be healers in the traditional sense. They were sent to make us uncomfortable enough to awaken, to agitate the soul into remembering what it promised to heal before it came into this life. But this role is not for the faint of heart. Empaths must learn not to drown in the pain they expose. They must become soul warriors strong enough to witness the shadow without becoming it. Their growth lies in learning that absorbing others' pain is not noble, it's self-abandonment. Their true power is in reflecting pain without internalizing it. This is where spiritual maturity begins, not with fixing others, but with seeing clearly and choosing to hold space without self-erasure. The empath's journey is the individuation process. Jung spoke of the integration of the personal and collective shadow into consciousness. It is the soul's rite of passage from emotional enmeshment to embodied truth. And through this, they don't just survive, they transmute. They take what is hidden and make it holy. They turn ancestral trauma into spiritual wisdom. They walk into the darkness not to be consumed by it, but to retrieve what the world forgot. The truth that healing doesn't begin with comfort, it begins with courage. Have you ever felt like your sensitivity was a curse, only to realize it was actually your calling? If you've discovered the deeper purpose of being an empath, share your insight in the comments. If you're still awakening to it, comment below. I embrace my soul's truth, and let's walk this path of spiritual awakening together. 2. The collective shadow and the archetype of the wounded mirror. Carl Jung warned that the empath's true role is not to heal, but to reveal. In a world that praises self-sacrifice and emotional caretaking, we've romanticized the empath as a gentle savior meant to mend the broken. But this is a comforting illusion that blinds us to their real spiritual function. Empaths are not here to be everyone's therapist. They are mirrors for the soul of humanity, reflectors of the collective shadow, that vast buried pool of unspoken shame, unprocessed trauma, and rejected truth we've cast into the unconscious. Their sensitivity is not a flaw. It is an attunement to what most people deny. They carry the emotional weight of generations, absorbing energies that never began with them: ancestral pain, cultural repression, societal grief. They are not emotionally weak. They are psychically calibrated to pick up what others run from. Consider Thomas, a high-functioning lawyer who always looked perfect on paper. Sharp, charming, successful. But every night, he came home feeling drained, confused by emotions that didn't belong to him. He felt the grief behind a coworker's smile. He sensed the resentment hidden under polite conversations. He absorbed the despair no one spoke of. For years, he thought he was broken and too sensitive for this world. But Jung would have told him, "Your pain is the echo of the collective, not a personal defect. You are the one who feels what others bury." The soul of an empath does not just react, it remembers. It stores the emotional codes of entire systems and families. And when you begin to honor this instead of fix it, the whole meaning of your sensitivity changes. An empath doesn't walk into a room and try to fix people they walk in and feel what is hidden. Their nervous system picks up emotional vibrations like sonar. The empath isn't overwhelmed because they're fragile. They're overwhelmed because they're tuned into the unspoken, the unseen, the unresolved. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that's exactly what empaths interrupt. They disrupt the avoidance. Their presence alone can trigger discomfort in others because it brings buried emotions to the surface, not by confrontation, but by resonance. They become a mirror, and people often don't like what they see reflected. This is why so many empaths feel misunderstood, attacked, or drained. They are not just navigating their own emotions, they are navigating the shadow field of humanity itself. But the moment an empath stops trying to fix others and starts witnessing with clarity, everything shifts. They stop absorbing and start discerning. They stop rescuing and start revealing. They realize they were never meant to be containers of pain, but catalysts for truth. Their soul didn't come here to carry other people's burdens. It came to awaken them to their own. This is not the path of the wounded healer, it is the path of the wounded mirror. One who reflects so clearly that it becomes impossible to lie, to suppress, or to pretend. This is the spiritual task Carl Jung hinted at, to make the darkness conscious. And empaths are the torchbearers of this task, not by force, but by presence. When you honor your role as a spiritual mirror instead of a savior, you reclaim your boundaries, your power, and your peace. You are not here to heal the world by losing yourself in it. You are here to stay awake to the soul of the world and remind it of what it has forgotten. That is the lesson. That is the truth. That is your mirror. If you feel the weight of emotions that aren't entirely yours, if you've sensed you're mirroring something bigger than yourself, comment below. I carry the collective light. Let's honor the empath's deeper role together and illuminate what the world tries to ignore. 3. The empath's suffering is an initiation, not a disorder. Empaths have long been misunderstood, mislabeled as fragile, dramatic, or emotionally unstable, when in truth, their pain is part of a profound spiritual initiation. Their suffering is not a malfunction. It's an ancient calling encoded deep within the soul. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that is exactly what the empath's journey demands. radical self-acceptance of a nature that feels everything, absorbs everything, and sees what others refuse to see. Empaths are not just emotional, they are spiritual mirrors, reflecting back the parts of humanity that have been buried, denied, or exiled. They carry not only their own wounds, but also the repressed grief of generations. Their dreams are not just dreams. They are mythic transmissions from the unconscious of the collective, warning, guiding, and revealing truths that words alone cannot speak. Their body reacts to energy before logic catches up, and their nervous system, often dismissed as too sensitive, is actually a finely tuned antenna for spiritual resonance. The empath's symptoms of anxiety, fatigue, and emotional overwhelm are not signs of weakness, but messages from a spiritual operating system designed to detect misalignment and dishonesty in the world around them. They don't just walk through life, they absorb its unseen vibrations, and this often makes others uncomfortable. Why? Because the empath exposes, not through confrontation, but through presence. And presence is the most honest mirror there is. The reason people ghost them, attack them, or misunderstand them is because the empath's energy unearths hidden guilt, shame, and unresolved trauma in others. They awaken what is asleep and bring discomfort to what has been comfortably numb. Their existence becomes an invitation, unspoken, unintentional for others to deal with what they have long avoided. You see, the empath was never sent to heal in the way most people imagine. They weren't meant to bandage the world's wounds while bleeding out themselves. They were born to reveal, and revelation is sacred. It precedes true healing. It forces the illusion to crack so that light can enter. That's why empaths are so often targeted, scapegoated, or isolated, because in a world addicted to emotional anesthesia, feeling everything is a revolutionary act. The empath becomes a spiritual catalyst, not through effort, but by being fully themselves. And when they begin to realize that their pain is not personal, but archetypal, everything shifts. They stop trying to fix others and begin to honor their own energy. They stop carrying what isn't theirs and learn to discern what's simply passing through. They stop apologizing for being too much and start recognizing that they were never too much. They were simply in environments that demanded too little depth. Their path isn't easy, but it is sacred. For in every tear they've shed, every emotion they've held, and every silence they've endured, they have served as vessels of truth. They remind humanity of what it means to feel, to witness, to not look away. And in doing so, they reclaim their spiritual authority, not as saviors, but as soul initiates, revealing the buried pain of the tribe so that something real, something honest, something whole can finally rise. If this message spoke to your soul and helped you see your sensitivity in a new light, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's continue uncovering the deeper purpose behind the empath's journey together. 4. The path of transmutation, from sponge to alchemist. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious," and that truth lies at the heart of every empath's spiritual path. You were never meant to be a sponge, endlessly soaking up the pain of others until it poisons your spirit. You were meant to become an alchemist, a soul who transforms suffering into insight and shadow into light. For too long, you may have mistaken your sensitivity for a curse, believing your role was to heal, to fix, to sacrifice. But true healing does not begin with rescuing others. It begins with remembering who you are. When the soul awakens, the empath no longer bleeds to make others whole. He sees that his sensitivity was not weakness, but preparation, not burden, but initiation. You were not called to martyrdom, but to mastery. To live as an awakened empath means transcending the reflex to fuse with others' emotions and stepping into the power of conscious witnessing. You are not here to dissolve into others' wounds. You are here to reflect them. The empath who rises stops personalizing what does not belong to him. He becomes the chalice, not the sponge, the sacred container, not the emotional landfill. Through discernment, he learns to feel without being devoured, to care without collapsing, to stand in love without losing himself. Boundaries, once feared as barriers, become the soul's defense against self-betrayal. He no longer abandons himself to make others comfortable. He honors his truth and protects his peace. This is the transmutation Jung spoke of, turning the raw energy of chaos into clarity through inner stillness and spiritual sovereignty. When an empath matures, he sees that he was never called to soothe dysfunction or pacify shadows. He was called to awaken people to what they refuse to face. His presence disrupts illusions. His silence speaks truths others are desperate to avoid. And yes, it may trigger, repel, or provoke, but that is part of his function. Because the empath's soul does not exist to maintain comfort. It exists to catalyze transformation. This is not about saving others. It's about standing so fully in your own healed frequency that others are forced to confront what they've buried. Just like the alchemists of old turned base metal into gold, the evolved empath turns pain into power, guilt into guidance, trauma into teaching. His wounds become windows, his sorrow becomes language, and his spirit becomes a lighthouse. The world will not always understand this role because it prefers empaths who stay small, compliant, endlessly giving. But the true empath is not here to be liked. He is here to reveal what has been hidden. The soul of the awakened empath holds both sensitivity and strength, compassion and confrontation, softness and fire. He stops asking for permission to exist and starts embodying the sacred responsibility of being the mirror. No longer afraid to reflect the collective shadow, he embraces his purpose to transmute, to witness, to transform, not because he chose the path, but because the path chose him. If you're ready to stop absorbing and start alchemizing, declare it in the comments. I am the chalice. I transmute shadow into wisdom. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this message with others on the path of transformation. 5. Awakening the soul's myth and becoming a living symbol. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth reveals the deeper mission of the empath not to fix, heal, or carry the burdens of others, but to expose what humanity refuses to confront within itself. The awakened empath is not a passive observer or an emotional sponge. They are an oracle, a living symbol of integration who walks at the edge of opposites between shadow and light, chaos and clarity, past and future. They disturb illusions not by force, but by embodying truth so deeply that it becomes impossible to ignore. Their spiritual presence calls out the masks people wear and the stories they tell themselves, not through confrontation, but through the unsettling clarity of simply being real. Sensitivity in this case is not fragility, it is depth. It is the soul's capacity to feel what others suppress and to remain whole in the face of fragmentation. In today's world, imagine the empath as the one in a room who speaks with silence, who unnerves the crowd by refusing to perform. They don't play roles. They don't seek applause. They don't participate in the emotional transactions most people rely on to avoid facing themselves. Their very presence becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look. Carl Jung warned that what we repress, we project, and empaths often carry the weight of that projection. They are called too intense, too soft, too much. But this too much is exactly what the soul needs to evolve. The empath is not here to rescue others from their pain. They are here to remind others of the pain they keep avoiding. And in doing so, they trigger transformation, not by effort, but by embodiment. This is not about being a martyr. The true empath has learned that constantly sacrificing themselves leads only to burnout, not healing. They begin to understand that the soul doesn't evolve through rescue, it evolves through revelation. And so they stop over-giving, stop over-explaining, and stop trying to be understood. Instead, they start to live as symbols. Symbols don't argue, they don't explain, they just exist, and their existence changes everything. This is what makes the empath a threat to systems built on suppression. They are the disruption that says, what you've buried, I've become. What you've denied, I've embodied. They force a reckoning, not through words, but through spiritual gravity. The deeper lesson here is not that empaths must protect themselves from the world, but that they must stop betraying their own truth to make the world feel safe. The soul's power lies in its refusal to abandon itself. And when an empath finally honors their sensitivity, their intuition, and their sacred discomfort with falsehood, they awaken not just as a person, but as a myth. They no longer fit in because they are no longer trying to. They walk as a contradiction, soft yet unshakable, open yet untouchable, wounded yet wise. And this paradox is their gift to the world, not to heal its surface, but to expose its wound so it may finally begin to heal itself. This is what Carl Jung tried to show us. This is the path of the empath, not as healer, but as revealer. Not as a fixer, but as a mirror. Not as a rescuer, but as sacred disruption. If this message stirred something deep within you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more spiritual insights. Here on Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the path of becoming not perfection, but presence. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's awaken the myth together. 6. The role of the empath in a dying culture. In a society that has numbed itself to feeling, the empath becomes a silent revolution. Not by shouting, not by demanding, but simply by feeling. Deeply, unapologetically. And in doing so, they disrupt the false harmony of a world that thrives on avoidance. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The empath is the one who makes the unconscious conscious. They don't just observe pain, they embody it. They absorb the unspoken sorrow, the generational shame, the cultural grief that others run from. And by holding that weight, they become mirrors that force others to see what they have long buried. Their gift is not to heal the wound, but to reveal where it festers. Not to soothe, but to stir. Not to rescue, but to awaken. To be an empath is not to be weak or fragile. It is to carry the spiritual memory of what it means to be fully human in an age that has forgotten. They are midwives of inner transformation, birthing new paradigms not through force, but through raw presence. They bring to light the truth that society tries so hard to repress, that emotional repression is not strength, it is sickness, that what we ignore in ourselves becomes what we inflict on others. And while the world praises efficiency and detachment, the empath bleeds truth. Their body aches where society is wounded. Their soul cries where the collective has gone silent. But that pain is not a flaw. It is a signal that something essential has been lost, that something sacred is calling to be remembered. In relationships, workplaces, families, and communities, the empath is often misunderstood, labeled too sensitive, too intense, too much. But their intensity is not a defect. It is a reflection of a society that has grown too cold to feel. Empaths do not come to offer comfort. They come to shake foundations. They are not meant to blend in, but to illuminate, to bring the hidden into the light. And that means they often walk alone, not because they are unworthy of belonging, but because their energy exposes the truth others are not yet ready to see. They disturb the illusion. They activate what's been suppressed. And while the world may push them away, the soul recognizes them because they carry the codes of something ancient, something real, something sacred. The empath's spiritual purpose is not to carry everyone's pain, but to show others where they've lost touch with their own. They are not emotional dumpsters. They are sacred barometers. And when they stop trying to fix what isn't theirs to heal, they rise, not as martyrs, but as mirrors, not as saviors, but as signalers. They don't save others. They awaken others to the truth within themselves. And that is the real medicine. That is the real miracle. Not in taking away pain, but in helping others see it clearly for the first time. In a world desperate to stay asleep, the empath becomes the alarm. And in their stillness, in their depth, in their refusal to harden, they remind us of what it truly means to feel, and why that feeling might be the most spiritual act of all. If this message stirred something deep within you, take a moment to affirm your role in this world. Comment below. I am a midwife of the new paradigm. I feel deeply, and I stand with the truth. And if you resonate with this vision, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss the next soul-shifting message from spiritual wisdom. 7. Final initiation, liberation, sovereignty, and soul alignment. True healing for the empath does not come from fixing others. It comes from remembering that their role was never to be the eternal rescuer, but the sacred witness. Their pain was never meant to be carried forever. It was meant to be understood, released, and transformed. The final initiation of the empath is not found in more suffering, but in liberation. Liberation from the need to please, from the burden of emotional absorption, from the illusion that their worth depends on how much they can carry for others. When an empath begins living in coherence with their soul, something extraordinary happens. They stop asking to be seen and start radiating truth. Their presence no longer seeks validation. It becomes a mirror that reflects the suppressed pain, shame, and shadow that society has long tried to avoid. They no longer walk into rooms silently shrinking. They walk in and shift the energy by simply being in alignment with who they truly are. Carl Jung warned that the empath's true task is not to heal, but to reveal. Their sensitivity is not a wound, it is a radar. Their empathy is not weakness, it is spiritual intelligence. Yet, for most of their lives, they were conditioned to betray that intelligence to avoid being too much. They were taught to deny their soul in order to be accepted, to silence their truth so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But the cost of that betrayal is soul deep. And eventually, something breaks. Not in a destructive way, but in a liberating one. They begin to see that their suffering was never random. It was a coded invitation to awaken. The empath, in their final spiritual transformation, stops asking what others need from them and starts asking what their soul needs to express through them. They become sovereign, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. They remember that their life is not meant to be lived through the expectations of others, but through the alignment of soul, purpose, and inner freedom. This is where the true power of the empath is revealed, not in the endless effort to fix others, but in the quiet refusal to betray themselves. They become a living symbol of what it means to embody truth without explanation, to walk away without guilt, and to feel deeply without drowning. Their soul no longer reacts, it resonates. And through this resonance, they transmit a new frequency to the world, one of clarity, sovereignty, and sacred presence. They stop performing. They stop over-explaining. They stop negotiating their boundaries. Instead, they simply live in such radical truth that others are forced to confront their own illusions. This is not arrogance, it is energetic clarity, and it is only possible when the empath chooses to align with their soul rather than their wounds. In this final phase, the empath becomes the myth breaker, the pattern disruptor, the spiritual catalyst. They don't need to be loud, aggressive, or dominant. Their power is not in how they speak, it's in the vibration of who they are. Their soul becomes their signature. Their sovereignty becomes their silence, and their presence becomes their purpose. To honor your sacred journey towards soul alignment and sovereignty, comment below. I release what's not mine and walk in truth. And if this message has awakened something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of transformation. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey into the true role of the empath. If this message resonated with your soul, if it helped you see yourself or the world a little more clearly, we invite you to be part of the conversation. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights that awaken, empower, and transform. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in your journey of spiritual understanding. Until next time, honor your sensitivity. It is not weakness, but revelation.